Welcome to this Sahara 4 exercise. In this exercise, we will discuss how the production information is organized, what are scenarios, phases, and subphases. For that, we are going to open our Sahara project, and to check which scenarios currently exist in the project, we need to go to Edit, Scenario. So, in a scenario, the best comparison to have is to consider it as a folder where we can store the different production information coming from different sources. By default, the scenario called history is always going to be created when the project is created. The idea is to import here all the information coming from the history of the wells and have it stored in this scenario. The other scenario created by default primary is an auxiliary tool that is used by the simulator, by the secondary recovery simulator, which in this case we are not going to delve much into detail with this scenario. We will discuss it more when we use the simulator in the future. But for now, we need to know that scenarios are basically different classifications of the production information that we can create, modify, or delete with these different buttons over here. Now we are going to create, as an example, a forecast scenario. We will call it forecast scenario. And here let's create a forecast example. And here we can see that we have different types of scenarios. Basically in Sahara there are four types of scenario. The measure scenario is just information that is imported, is not used in any calculation. History, for example, is by default the measure scenario that we are going to have in any project. Um, it could be useful to create other measure scenarios. For example, you want to organize different information coming from different sources. For example, let's say that our history may have different sources of information that we may want to compare or having in consideration. Maybe we have some official data and other data that is not as well documented, but we may want to have it in different folders, as the example I said previously. But in this case, we are going to have it in different measure scenarios. Also, we have the injection and calculation scenarios. Both of these are used for the simulator. One is going to be the input of the simulator injection, and the other is going to be the output where all the information is stored. In this case, we are not going to discuss much them further because we will use them later when we use the secondary recovery simulator in Sahara. And also the other one that is relevant is forecast. Here in forecast, the idea is to differentiate it from measure scenarios because they are used for specific functions in Sahara. We can import directly the information into the forecast scenario. Maybe we want to import information coming from a different simulator into the forecast, or we may want to use the simulation done in other software or even in Sahara. But also we may want to use the decline analysis coming from Sahara. We need to, if we are going to export or to save any information coming from a decline analysis, we need to save it in a forecast scenario as in this example. Also, the forecast scenarios are using the forecast exercises tool as well. We can only save information coming from forecast in these kind of scenarios, so they are relevant to have in your project if you are going to work with any kind of forecast, um, trying to predict any production coming from the history production data. And also, not only we have types of scenarios, but we have different organization in subphases. Um, we have plenty of them. For example, for the forecast scenarios, we can divide the production in primary and secondary recovery. We can have a base workover and drilling forecast scenario. We can have a reserve scenario. In this case, the reserves are going to be organized by probability P1, P2, and P3. We can have a simple scenario without any subphase that is going to have the total phase that is not going to differentiate between the production in any way. We can have primary, secondary, tertiary recovery. We can have this the same, but instead of having it as a total, as basic on incremental production. Low, that will be like pessimistic base and optimistic outlook of the forecast. And we can also have P1, P2, and P3 extended. So the idea is that we can import or organize all this information in different subphases based on how we want to expose or to show the data. in each different scenario. Consider that the subphases are not the same. For example, the calculation scenario is not going to have the same subphases as the forecast scenario. This is mainly because this one is related to the simulator. But in the case of the forecast, that is the one that we want to create, we can have all these different options over here. In this case, we are going to create, for example, just primary and secondary recovery differentiation in subphases. So now we have our new scenario. We can access the information of this scenario. For example, if we want to use later in the production window, or if we have variables stored in this forecast scenario, we can access them basically from all the same places that we would with any other scenario. Let's save the scenario created. And for example, let's say that we have production data uh, coming from the forecast scenario. We can use it instead of history. I mean, we can, for example, plot bubbles that will have the production only coming from the forecast scenario and not from the history, and we can do that differentiation without any issue. So, but for now, the scenario this forecast scenario is going to be completely independent from the history scenario that is created by default in Sahara. Um, so now let's go back to this scenario window so we can check the functionalities. Okay, so if we want to create a new scenario, we're going to use this button. This one, the delete this scenario, is going to allow us to delete scenarios created that are not history primary simulator. This is going to allow us to copy the production data from one scenario to the other. This is useful, for example, if we want to use a scenario that is going to be the history plus the forecast. We may want to copy the history here and paste it in the other scenario, and then import the forecast. We are going here. We can paste here. This is similar to the erase button, but this is going to erase all the information inside the scenario. Is going to clear the scenario, and it's going to leave it blank without any information. Here we are going to restore all the changes that we did before pressing save. And finally, this button is going to totalize the productions. For example, if we have the different, just to give an example to explain it, if we have the different production data coming from different layers, the production is differentiated between layers, and we don't have the total value of the object of the well. This button is going to allow us to create the variable at the well level and show us a production coming from the well, not from the different layers. And we can totalize also from different subphases. This button is going to help us totalize values that are divided and create a total value that is correspondent to the sum of its parts. So that will be all for this tutorial. The important concept that we have to remember here is that we have scenarios that are similar, that work similar to folders, in the sense that we can store the information there, and we can have different kinds of scenarios. Some are used for the simulator, and some others can be used either for storing information belonging to the history, or that doesn't have any other use other than showing the information, as the measure scenarios, and others can be used for forecast. In this case, this will be the target of the decline analysis or the forecast exercises tool, for example, and they have other special functionalities associated with the forecast tools that Sahara has. Also important to remember that we have the different subphases that we can edit and modify in the scenarios, and that we can erase, copy the information from scenarios, or totalize the productions inside the scenarios. So that will be all for this tutorial, and thank you for watching.